We all know dating is not easy. Thankfully, there are people like Lindsey Metselaar. She started a platform called We Met At Acme, and it's helping all of us navigate dating. Please welcome to the show, Lindsey Metselaar. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really excited to talk with
Me
you.
too.
I've been a big fan of yours for a really long time. I've been following you on We Met at Acme for a long time, and I have so many questions for you. But my first question is, what do you believe?
Well, as you know, because we had a little pre-convo, I
Yeah.
believe in astrology, hardcore.
Mm.
I believe in some traditionalities when it comes to dating. I believe in mind over matter and happiness and love. Is that too cheesy?
Not at all. I love that you said you believe in love. I'm guessing that's why you started this platform.
It's a big part of it. It's a big part of it.
So tell us that story. How did it start?
Yeah, so I it's almost 3 years ago now, which is crazy. I had found myself kind of all of a sudden out of the blue. I was dumped on my birthday, and it like I had never really experienced something like that before. I had been dumped, obviously, everyone has, but it was just like totally blindsided. And I just did not see it coming at all. And I realized that I actually had a lot to learn in the realm of love and dating, whereas I had thought that I was like the guru already, just
Mm.
because my friends had like come to me for advice and things like that. And so I realized how much more there was to learn. And so I just started talking to friends about it and recording our conversations. And then it spiraled into like, talking to experts and talking to this person and that person. And it got, I've learned so much since starting it.
Incredible. We're going to get into what you learned. I want to know everything. I want to hear it all because I'm so excited. But I'm just curious about, after you've learned and understood this about your generation, millennials, what is it about? Is there something very specific about millennials? Because it's primarily about millennials, right? That you're
Yes.
you're talking to, you're giving advice to. What about
Yes.
millennials is so specific about dating?
Mm. I think because millennials, there's so many different ways to get in touch for us. There's so many different platforms of communication now. And as a millennial, I understand, how to navigate those. And I feel like what I really needed was some sort of like older guiding force to tell me like, okay, well, if they like message you on Instagram story but they don't text you but they Snapchat you, like all this stuff, then it would make a lot more sense to me. And I just feel like millennials more than any other generation struggle when it comes to dating because there's so many confusing elements to it. Like, there's the apps, there's Instagram, there's Snapchat, there's LinkedIn. It's like
Mhm.
we're dating on every possible form right now.
Which I would imagine, it's interesting because when I think about it, is it good that you have these options, or is it really terrible? I mean,
Mm.
could it go either way? Good being options, bad being too many options?
It's funny you ask that because it's like I'm thinking about packing for a vacation, and like when I overpack, I am helpless on that vacation. Like I just don't know what to wear. But when I pack like four different combinations, I'm so good at figuring out outfits. And I feel like dating is the same way. It's like we have all of these options and we're so jaded. Like we're like, oh, who cares about that person? I'll just swipe them away and swipe into a new person and get someone new in my life. And I think that, actually makes it more difficult. Whereas like my grandparents' generation were like, oh, there's a girl who's kind of my age living in my mom's building. Like she's gonna be my wife, you know?
Yeah.
And it worked out forever. So I think it's just too many options, like overstimulated.
Overstimulation, overchoiced. Um, yeah, I mean, well, that would be the big differentiator, right? Between even my generation, you know?
Mm.
So you said earlier you did this because you believe in love, and I want to hear more about what your idea of love is.
I would say that love is really, it's a lot of things and it's different to a lot of people, but I think it's really putting that person first, like before anything else, and not in an unhealthy, like codependent way, but just in like you always have their back. And I think it's also just like having no I mean, of course you're gonna have negative feelings, right? But genuinely like wanting to be with that person all the time, they're like your favorite person.
Yeah.
And, I hear all the time, like, you love, it's like your best friend, you marry your best friend. And I don't know about that, right? Like, should you be really close friends with your partner? Yes. Um, so it's less about them being your best friend, I think, and more about them being your favorite person to choose to spend time with, you know?
Right.
What do
Absolutely.
you think?
I think love could be love can be so many different things, but I think for me, love is yes, it's having someone's back. It's having their back, and also really just is being kind and being understanding and empathetic in any situation. I think when you really love someone, there has to be some sort of element of unconditional love in a way,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
because you have to allow that person to go through the ebbs and flows of life, and being with them through those times is what's the challenge. I think that's what love is that being side by side with that person through thick and thin and death and all the trials and tribulations of life, which can
Mhm.
be really problematic at times. I think that that's love. And I don't think you know really that you love someone until you're faced with those issues, you know?
Yep. Yeah. It's really going through stuff, but also, them being there when there's nothing to go through and when it's like, quote unquote boring. And
Yeah.
so it's like, writing it all out with that person.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. I mean, it comes up to the pandemic for me. Like, I think how has this been? I mean, in terms of trials and tribulations, what's been going on with your base and talking about this pandemic and how people are dating? I mean, what's going on?
Yeah. Well, my listeners have and followers have been talking to me a lot about virtual dating, and I think now are just finally making a transition to socially distanced dates. And it's been, I think the pandemic, it depends on what kind of person you are. If you are very outgoing by nature, um, you can date through this pandemic. But if you're more of an introvert, I think that this is a time to like really reflect and take time to yourself. My friends who are more on the introverted side, they haven't been dating at all. They don't see the point, maybe they're at their parents, maybe this, that, but they haven't been dating. And my more extroverted friends are going out of their way to make dates happen. And
Mm,
some I would say are even thriving during this time because you have the time to date multiple people and to really see who it works with and, who it might not work with.
wow. That's incredible. So people show up in their masks and they're 6 feet away and they're doing
Mhm.
the whole thing. And now what's going on with, is there something about COVID tests that you have on your profile that you can,
Yes.
wow.
Yeah. Well, I no, I don't know if you have that, on your a lot of people are writing, like, "I have the antibodies," and things like that. But I actually just spoke to a woman yesterday who said, she wasn't comfortable going on a date with someone unless they had gotten tested, and so the person really nicely went and got tested and, was negative and showed her the results, and that showed her the dedication that he really wanted to go out with her.
That's great. I mean,
Mhm,
that's certainly a that's a keeper. Um,
mhm.
it's good. Has this shifted? Has the pandemic curiously shifted anything in what millennials are looking for at this point? I mean, any perspective at all for what people are
I
looking for?
really actually don't think it's shifted. I think if you wanted a relationship pre-pandemic, you still want a relationship now. And if you wanted to be single pre-pandemic, you still want to be single now. There could be, there could have been like this cuffing season part of, when we're all in quarantine, like maybe you want a partner for that moment.
Mm,
But I think what you wanted before and what you want after usually remains the same.
right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So is there, I'm curious, like with millennials, I feel like millennials are healthier, they're into fitness or they're into green
Mhm.
juice. I think it's more about a wellness kind of vibe. Is there anything specific to dating that has to do with, is there anything specific like that that comes up with millennials and dating? I mean, are people looking for more intuitive boyfriends and girlfriends? I mean, I just feel that that's just of the moment, and I'm wondering if that has anything to do with dating.
Yeah, like if people want someone who is more spiritual, you mean?
Yes.
I think, that would be amazing. I think I not to generalize, but I feel like women are just more spiritual than men. But I think a lot of men are becoming more spiritual as well and like becoming more open to hearing about that stuff.
Hmm.
Whereas I know like 5 years ago, if you brought up astrology on a date, a man would be like, okay, she's certifiable. Like she's
Right.
nuts.
Right.
Whereas now I think they're actually interested in it and they're more open to, believing in their charts and things like that. Like I remember on my first date with my boyfriend, I asked him what time he was born so that I could look up his chart.
So good.
And, I did it in a way in which it, like, seemed, less intense,
Hmm.
but I think that more people are n like, just all of that stuff is normalizing, like, meditation, is huge for men now, and so I think it would be nice to have a man be more in touch with that side. I mean, I know, like, women love men who go to therapy, and so that's somewhat spiritual.
Absolutely. It's learning to go inside and figure it out, which is great. I mean, I
Mhm.
think that should be, that should be a need. You have to go to therapy before you date. I think that's a
Right.
great thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. So what about all this data that you're collecting? Because I love answering these questions that you throw out to your audience. It's really fun to see what the response is to this. So what are you doing with the data, and what have you learned? Anything really unique?
Yeah, so I'm keeping a lot of the data, in, like, an Excel spreadsheet just, to have, and it also saves automatically on the Instagram itself. And then what was the second part of the question? What do you do with the data?
Yeah, what do you do? And then have you found out anything specific that you kind of were surprised at asking
I
all
feel
these
like I
questions on
always
Instagram?
find things out, like, all the time with all the different questions. You know, most I guess most, like, prevalent and, like, what makes me the most upset is I find out that, like, people accept a lot of behavior that isn't
Mm,
fair to them, and I think, thank God for a lot of these polls because people realize based on submitting something that they're not being treated right. I've had, most recently, I think last night, someone asked me, is it okay if, or is it a red flag or a deal breaker if the person you're dating doesn't say anything or wish you good luck when you have surgery? And like, that's not okay. Like, if this is someone that you're dating and they don't acknowledge the fact, like, why do you, are you dating at all? Like, just
Mhm.
these little things, I think people accept and they're just like, okay, that's what it's going to be like for me. And that makes me sad, but it also makes me happy that people realize that they can't accept something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. This is where the therapy comes in for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, how much do you address that on your programs then? Do you deep
Mm.
dive? Do you take deep dives into a lot of these issues?
We do. We take deep dives. The we answer a lot of these poll questions on the podcast. Like right now, at the last 10 minutes of every podcast, we do like rapid fire poll questions. And we do. And so like we talk about often, what is right
Mhm.
versus what isn't, and what like gaslighting is, and what toxic relationships and abusive relationships look like. And so I hope that, people who listen are guided to make the right decision.
How much do you share it with your personal, like in your own personal relationships? You're in a relationship, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
I'm in a relationship.
so how much
Uh,
do you share about that?
I really kind of share, like, I don't hold back. There, if there are things that my partner would not want me to say, or like if I can, read the room on what's okay to say and what's not okay, I will share, surface level things. Like, I'm not going to put my partner in a position where like he's, horrified that I shared X, Y, and Z. But I do want people to know, like, this is what's going on in my personal life. I'm in this relationship. This is when it began. This is when my last relationship ended. These are the things that we do together that are great. This is like, the positives, that like if things come up, if we fight about things, like I'm happy to talk about, talk through that stuff. I just feel like it's so important to really, like, if you're someone who's considering yourself like a dating, expert or something, and you don't share your own dating life, I don't feel like it's relatable.
Yeah.
And I know, like, I have a lot of friends who also have dating podcasts, and they are not as open about it. And I don't think there's like one right way to do it. But for me, I want to be like as authentic as possible so that my listeners can relate to the things I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. How many people do you feel, including yourself, like how often do you meet people online? Is it I mean, what do you think the percentage is? Just curiously.
Well, right now, there's like 90% of people who are meeting their partner online or virtually dating, which is crazy because I think before it was like 60, but with the pandemic, everything, went up and expanded. And
Mm.
I understand why. I mean,
Yeah.
people are lonely and people want to connect.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, 90%. Wow. But normally it's 60. That's interesting. I'm wondering, what it's going to be like now in the next, like, what's your kind of prediction in terms of the next, let's just say things start to get a little bit better. I mean,
Hmm.
what's your prediction with what's going on in terms of dating and how this goes down? I mean, do you feel that people are going to all of a sudden start to get married because they don't want to be alone? I mean, like, what's the trend?
I think, I think that people who like met in quarantine are feeling much closer to one another because it's like you're spending every moment together. And I actually have a friend who just got engaged after dating someone for 5 months. They met in quarantine.
You're kidding.
And so I think that is either going to happen a lot more, and then the opposite is going to happen where you see people breaking up and realizing this isn't the person I want to be with. I can't spend another second with them, on the couch or however they're spending time. And so I think we're going to see like the two extremes.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Um, so what's going on with your platform? What's the future? What do you want to do with it? I mean, aside from just
Yeah.
rocking it right now, I mean, where do you
Yeah.
see it going?
Well, I would love to, continue to have this platform for people to get advice and like feel like they have like this older sister when it comes to dating. And expand on that, whether it's, a show or a column, maybe stepping in as like a Carrie Bradshaw type.
Yeah.
Just, so people feel supported when it comes to this stuff. I know that I didn't really have a guide when I was, first graduating from college, getting into New York City and trying to figure out the dating world. So I would love to, be that for people.
It's great. I love it. What are your go-to pieces of advice?
My go-to pieces of advice, you said,
Yeah.
or
Yes.
mhm. I would say if you're confused, like they're not interested, confusion means exactly what it seems. If they're like on and off, hot and cold, it's a no-go and you should step away. Um, I would say you shouldn't question things too much. Like when it's right, you're not like what else is out there. You really are in it. And a lot of my advice comes like in the form of like dating, like for actually going on dates, which is just like ask a lot of questions, smile a lot, and if you're a woman dating a man, don't send a follow-up text the next day.
Oh my God. Thank you. I have had fights with friends left, right, and center
Mhm.
about this. I don't understand. No, you don't have to send a thank you. There's no thank you. He needs to reach out to you and say thank you.
Yep, exactly. Like, why are you thanking them so many times? And also, like, interrupting their own thought process on, like, if they were gonna message you, It's like a whole you're messing it all up. Just, like, let it be.
Right, because there's an energy. There's a thing. There's a dance you have to play. It's like it tit tat. It's like a thing.
Yeah,
Not tip. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
No, of
But
course.
I mean, it's just there's a thing that has to go down, and it has to be natural and organic. Because what I think is, and listen, I've never dated on an app, so I don't know. But you know, m- I look at it as incredibly, it's like, and it's not very authentic and it's not very organic the way you meet
Mm,
people these days. So at least let the guy have let him feel like a man, or,
yeah,
or let the person feel like they're in control in some way. You don't have to be
exactly.
the power female in every situation,
Mhm. Agreed,
you know?
agreed. Just
I
let
mean,
it rock.
just let it, exactly, let it go, enjoy it. I'm so glad you said that, because that's just, I hope all my friends are listening to this podcast, because that's just the one thing that would really. And then when something happens, and then let's say the next day and the guy says, okay, thank you, it was great let's say he reaches out,
Right.
and then the person's like, oh, thanks for, yeah, it was great. And then she doesn't hear from him for a couple of days. And then that's when, again, she's compelled to reach out and send another message, or send a
Mhm.
message saying, hey, no, the advice is no texts, right?
No, don't do it. Don't do it. Just like let it happen as it's supposed to happen and stop like chasing after someone that doesn't want to be with you.
Exactly. Exactly. Any advice about working and dating someone in the same office?
That's a good one. That comes up often too, whether it's their boss or just their coworker. I would say, just because it's fun, like don't tell anyone unless like you feel comfortable, and have this like, tension when you are working because like it's really fun, and also I don't think it's something that should go on forever. I think similar to like long distance, when someone has an end date, like you should have an end date where like one of you gets another job. Because I think can get too complicated to, have 0 degrees of separation. But
Mhm.
generally I've heard it work out tons of times. It's just they followed the advice of like one ended up getting a different job eventually.
Mm, okay, cool. How do you feel about, I'm asking a couple of questions here because I'm like compelled to do that right now, but
I love it.
I just need, how do you feel about age differences with, people dating? What's your take on that?
I really truly believe that age is just a number. I have tons of friends, who date younger, who date much older. If you connect with someone and like your energies line up, like that's really all that matters. I think it's just really important to be able to have something to talk about.
How much have you thought about matchmaking?
Mm, a lot. I do some amateur matchmaking in that like I match up friends and friends like of friends. I actually did some virtual matchmaking when the pandemic began, and it was really fun, but I don't think that my journey is to become a matchmaker. I think it's more of just like if it happens that like I have one great friend who would be great for another friend, we'll set them up. But it is a lot of pressure to matchmake, and I feel like
Hmm.
I'd prefer to matchmake people who didn't ask, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. What about long distance dating? How do you feel about
Mm.
that? Can it work?
Again, if you have an end date, it can totally work. Whether that's an end date because one of you is moving or you guys are both moving to somewhere in the middle. I think if you have an end date, it totally works. And if you make an effort, or if one of you is working remotely like forever, then it can work. I've seen tons of relationships that started long distance that are now they've gotten married and everything. So I think it's just about like your levels of commitment to seeing each other and making that effort.
Yeah,
But it's
absolutely.
not for me personally. Like I've done it and I don't like it.
Right, right. Yeah. What if there's a religious barrier?
Mm. I think that if it's really important to your family and your family is really important to you, it's going to be tough to get past that. But if it's just like two people of different religions who both aren't super religious, it's fine. Um, But I would say, if you're Catholic and it's really important to you to raise your kids Catholic, you should look for someone Catholic. And the apps actually make it really easy for you to say, like, I only want to see people who are atheists, and I only want to see Buddhists, and I only want to see Jews. Like, they're really good at, and that's actually why I tell a lot of people, like, if you have specific, like, non negotiables, you should actually be on the apps.
Mm. I kind of am seeing a We Met at Acme app where actually you do that.
Mm. Would you fund the back end?
Sure.
No, but that would be, I mean, that would be so cool. I worry about like making a dating app, and I'll tell you why, because they're so like monopolized. Like the ones that are popular right now are popular because there's so many people on them. And every time someone tries to make a new dating app, it doesn't work just because they can't get enough people there, you know?
Well, Lindsay, you're amazing. You're beautiful. And that color is so
You.
gorgeous. If you can't
My
see right
favorite
now, you're not,
color.
it's green. Yeah. If people are watching or not watching this and just listening to the podcast, Lindsay's wearing this beautiful green sweatshirt and it looks fab.
Thank
Um,
you.
well, you are amazing. And I'm really stoked to talk to you today. And thank you so much
Of
for your
course.
time and all that you do, because I know it helps a lot of people. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's helping people and spreading good vibes, and
It
you
is.
definitely do that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrea. So nice to chat with you.